Last month, author Tae Keller was chosen to receive the 2021 Newbery Medal for her book When You Trap a Tiger. The 27-year-old author's second middle-grade novel is about a young Korean-American girl who finds herself exploring her identity and heritage as she bargains with a mystical Korean tiger in the hope of healing her sick grandmother. The Newbery Medal is, of course, widely known as the most prestigious award in children's literature, given annually since 1922 by the American Library Association to the most distinguished book in the category published the previous year. And this year's award was all the more exciting and meaningful for Koreans everywhere, as Keller won the 100th Newbery Medal and also was named the best Asian Pacific American literature. Her novel hit bookstores in Korea this week. And today we have the honor of speaking with Tae Keller herself, who joins us all the way from Seattle. First of all, thank you for coming on the program. It's lovely to see you. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And, well, I think it's been raining quite a lot in Seattle. And, well, from what I gathered from your book, you're not really a big fan of rain. I mean, you grew up in Hawaii as well. So how are you really coping with this kind of weather?
Yes, there is a lot of rain in the book. I'm coping with it okay. I'm new to Seattle, so I'm adjusting.
Right, I see. Well, let's talk about your book. I mean, first of all, congratulations. A very proud moment for Koreans as well. And, well, I'm sure no one was prouder than your family members. And, of course, this book was very much inspired by your experience of hearing Korean folktales from your own grandmother, or 할머니 in Korean. Now, you've been able to tell her your own fairy tale. I mean, how did she like your book?
She's thrilled. She's so proud. And she's so excited that it's going to be translated in Korean and that Korea has really responded to this book and is excited. You know, she kind of says, somewhat jokingly, that American kids are going to read this, but really, this is a Korean book for Korean people. So she's so excited.
I see, and it really must have been an incredible moment being awarded, well, the most prestigious prize in children's literature, especially the 100th of its kind, and also being an Asian American as well. I mean, how was that for you? And out of all the reactions you got as well, what was your favorite reaction?
This is something that I would dream about, but I never thought would actually happen. So it's amazing. Sometimes it's hard to believe that it's even real, but it's so exciting. And my husband was the first person to find out. He was kind of listening in the other room while I was on the call with the Newbery committee. And I hung up the phone and I just started crying because I was so emotional. And he ran over and he started dancing and saying, "Oh my gosh, you won, you won."
Well, how did you guys celebrate?
Well, we celebrated a lot on Zoom because of the times we're living in. So I called my whole family and they were all so happy.
Right, and well, I wasn't trying to be creepy, but I did stalk you a bit in your previous interviews, and I know you celebrated with your favorite Korean dish, which also comes out in the book. I mean, did you make it yourself, or did you go to a Korean restaurant?
Yeah. So I made it myself. I used to eat it a lot growing up. I used to eat naengmyeon, and I thought that it was this family recipe, this special recipe, although it turned out that my hominy was just buying one of those packets from the Korean grocery store where you just kind of open up the spices and throw it in. But I love it. It's kind of a comfort food for me.
Right, buckwheat noodles, or naengmyeon in Korean, right? Summertime favorites. And, well, I'm sure you had loads of that growing up in Hawaii. But, well, you said that your journey to writing this book, it began when you told someone in college that you were 1/4 Korean, and then you felt compelled to sort of go back and find the Korean folktales that you heard as a child from your grandmother. Then you ended up writing your own, and in a way, it seems to really correlate with the way your protagonist Lily discovers both her family's past and also the strength of her own voice as she unlocks all these powerful stories. How did writing this book and, in a way, trapping your own tiger really change you throughout the process?
Yeah, so I was lucky to grow up in Hawaii where there are a lot of Asian people and specifically a lot of biracial Asian people. So growing up, I sometimes struggled, but I never really had to question my identity until I went to college and I went to the mainland. And that is a place where being biracial and being Asian is more unusual. And so I kind of started digging more into my family history and my past, and I started asking my grandmother about her stories growing up and her childhood in Korea. And I started learning not just about my family, but in learning about my family and Korean history, I learned so much about myself and about the way that my hominy and my mom raised me and how Korean history has really influenced the person that I've become.
And really, with your story about Lily, you're telling a story about her family, a family of 4 Korean women and girls. And, well, each of them are very strong in their own way, and they're holding on to this hope that their circumstance in the book will get better. Did Korean women throughout history have a special meaning for you as you wrote this book?
Of course. I mean, so I think it started with my own family and looking up to the women in my family and how strong they are. But also, I had heard stories about the history, and I learned even more in the process of writing this book. And, you know, Korean women especially have such a dark history and a lot of trauma in that history. And I'm so inspired that even despite how dark it is and that trauma, that they have been able to since tell some of their stories. And I just think that's so inspiring. And if they are able to tell their stories, then I should be able to tell mine as well and also honor their stories in any way that I can.
Right, and what were some of these stories or issues that you hope will be shared more with the world from Korea?
Yeah, there is a limit to how much I can explicitly mention in a book for children. But I do have a few lines in the book about what happened with Japan. And my hope is that I can kind of bring stuff up that kids might be reading about and maybe they're curious to learn more. And maybe they'll go to the library and they'll read some history or they'll ask one of their teachers or they'll kind of walk through that door that I've cracked open for them and maybe learn some more on their own.
And well, I really think one of the lessons I got from your book was that stories, they're really meant to be shared and they have this magic of connecting people, not only within families and cultures, but within wider and very diverse communities like those in the United States as well. And also, as a Korean who grew up outside of Korea, it wasn't always easy to figure out who I was and also having to explain my culture to others, and that very mixed feeling of feeling very protective of certain elements of your culture, but at the same time being a bit embarrassed or a bit awkward about it at the same time. And it would really help if I'd been able to read about characters like Lily who go through very similar things. Was there anything similar that you experienced? And do you think having more diversity in children's literature has started to change that?
Of course, I think that diversity is so important. And like I said, I was lucky growing up to be surrounded by people who looked like me and who were understanding their identity in a similar way to me. But I know that there are so many kids in so many places around the world, really, and where I am now on the mainland in the US, that aren't surrounded by that community and feel very alone and very split between worlds. I think that there is a feeling sometimes, at least with people in America, that people should fit into one box and they should be one thing or the other. Like they should be Korean or American, but not Korean American, or they should be white or Asian, but not biracial. And so I hope that in telling stories like these, that kids who don't necessarily fit into one box can feel like they can be more than one thing and they can embrace their whole identity.
And I think that's a very good message to a lot of children, a lot of teenagers and young adults who feel like they really have to choose. And of course, you yourself got this question in college, and you answered that you're a quarter Korean. We always feel like we have to choose or quantify it, but as you said, and And the message, the feeling I get from your book is that you are your own person and you don't have to break it down to those figures. But, well, now both of your books, both your protagonists in the science of breakable things and your recent novel, When You Trap a Tiger, they're in their early teens and they're both developing their biracial identities while trying to help someone they love. What do you think compels you to write middle grade literature dealing with these kind of issues?
Yeah, I was writing basically my whole life. So my mom is also a writer. And so I would sit next to her and imagine one day writing my own books. And so I wrote books about lots of different people of lots of different ages. But it wasn't until about 5 or 6 years ago when I started writing books about middle schoolers that I felt like I really found my voice as an author. And I think that's because my memories of that age are so vivid, because that age is the time when you're really transitioning from childhood to adulthood, and you have so many new experiences and so many new feelings, and you're starting to really question where you belong in the world, you know, in a broader sense than just your one family or your one school. So I think that it's a really exciting time and also a very challenging time. And I also feel like it's important to write about kids that age, because I know that sometimes as adults, it can be easy to just dismiss kids and not really pay attention to what they're going through. But they are experiencing some very real, valid feelings. And I think it's important to recognize that.
And it's really amazing how you, you really wrote this in such a eloquent, beautiful way, and it must have really taken an enormous amount of time and research to look into these old folklore and also research about tigers, Korean history. Were there any fun or weird facts that you discovered in the process?
Yeah, so I started with the folktale of the sun and the moon and the siblings that are chased by the tiger into the sky. But I was also writing these other fairy tales that I was mostly inventing. And I was trying to reference some traditional Korean fairy tales and also referencing some American fairy tales. But I felt like I was just inventing a lot on my own. And some of the best parts about the writing process were finding these parallels of stuff that I thought were just in my head, but actually had some basis in reality. So one example that I always think about is I was writing a story about a young girl who lives on an island in Korea. And once a year, the sea at that island parted. And I thought that I had just written this story about this fictional island where the sea parts. But in my research, I found that there is Jindo Island, where once a year the sea seems to part. And of course, it's not quite the same as in the book. It's not this whole magical thing. But I just thought it was incredible to find parallels like this. And it made me feel like, you know, I was writing alone in my apartment, but the stories that I was telling were part of a bigger Korean storytelling tradition. And it was great to feel like I was part of something bigger than just myself.
Well, that really is an incredible coincidence and parallel, as you said. And, well, looking into the future now, beyond this book, do you have another book that you're working on at the moment? And if so, I mean, what can you really tell us about it so far?
Yeah, so I'm writing a book that should be coming out next year. It's called Jennifer Chan is Not Alone, and it's about that same middle school age. It's about bullying and learning how to forgive each other, and also potentially looking for aliens and life outside of Earth. So that has been a lot of fun to write.
Oh, so from eggs, tigers to aliens. I like it. Well, I'm really looking forward to your next book, and really, I honestly couldn't put down When You Trap a Tiger, and I'm currently reading The Science of Unbreakable Things as well. So, well, we're really excited about your book, When You Trap a Tiger, and your next one as well. Thank you so much for being on the program. This is where we're going to have to wrap up today. It was wonderful speaking with you. That was Tae Keller, Newbery Award-winning author of When You Trap a Tiger. Don't miss her book. Thank you again so much for your time.
Thank you.
And to our viewers, thank you as always for watching and have a lovely weekend wherever you are. Goodbye.